Shauna, first of all, I have to tell you that this is one of those like high water mark moment, like one of those days I will always remember on the podcast because I'm a big fan of just saying if it's true, you are my favorite author. You are my favorite author. Savor was the first devotional I ever had. You have walked me through so many hard seasons you don't even know about. And so I am super geeking out that you're here. So thank you so much for being here.
Oh my goodness. I am, that made me just a little bit teary, I have to tell you. Thank you for saying that. That
Yeah.
really, really means a lot to me. Thank you.
Yeah. I feel like you're leading up to this book launch. I'm also doing a book launch. I think we are 1 week apart, actually. I'm April
Oh,
5th. Are you
oh
April
yeah. I'm
12th? Yeah.
April 12th. Yes.
Oh, and so I know like how exhausting this stretch of season is. And so I hope you know just how much your words matter and like the work that it
Mm.
takes to get there, like that it impacts people so much. So thank you for all of that. And I got to read the book ahead of time. I read it cover to cover yesterday and the day before, and I love it so much. And I feel like it is. I was thinking about this yesterday as I was making my bed. I was thinking that it's sort of like this. It's the salve to the wound of the last 2 years that so many of us need, but it's also kind of like the cleaning out of the wound first,
Mm.
right? It's not just like slapping something on top of it to try to gloss over everything that's happened in the last couple of years. It's like, let's process what this did
Mm.
to us. Let's process what this was like. And so much of this book is about being a beginner again. That can be in all sorts of different ways, but it's also about being a beginner when like all of the rules of the world have just been flipped upside down, as we all know has happened. It's happened for us globally, it's happened for us individually. And I want to just talk a little bit about this concept. It's the subtitle of the book of like new ways when the old ways stop working. And we're going to talk about that from a few different vantage points. But first, just kind of let people know, even where the title, I guess I haven't learned that yet. Talk a little bit about where that came from and like how that even became sort of like the guiding focus of the book.
Absolutely. So, my husband and I and our kids, we are lifelong Midwesterners. We both grew up in the suburbs of Chicago. That's where we met. That's where we got married. We lived for a while in Michigan, moved back to Chicago for a long time. And then 3 years ago, we moved to Manhattan, and that's a whole story in itself, but we were excited to do it. And also it represented just a complete and total life change. We had never lived in a city before. We'd never lived in an apartment before. My son, Mac, had never lived in any house except the one we were moving from. And so we moved to Manhattan in November. The kids start school in December, and absolutely everything about our lives is new. The space we're living in, the way we're living, we're taking subways instead of having cars. We're walking to school instead of taking the bus. And it was great. And also our kids kept coming home from school with questions where there were just like, either things were just really different, or there were little like places where the curriculum didn't match up exactly. They're like, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to do this. And so that they kept asking like, why don't I know how to do this? Or why is this so hard? Or when will I figure this out? And then I realized under those questions were a really different set of questions. They were actually asking like, am I okay? Am I falling behind? Am I dumb? And when I realized that's what was happening, I was like, oh, no, okay, we got to talk about this in a totally different way. You're not dumb. You're new. You're not failing. You're a beginner. You're not falling apart. You're figuring it out. This is how it is to be new. You are smart and competent and brave and new. And so it feels sort of bad, but we're going to normalize that feeling in our house. And so I wrote literally on a piece of printer paper with a Sharpie, and I put it on our completely bare apartment living room wall with a piece of blue painter's tape. And it said, I guess I haven't learned that yet.
Yeah.
And I said, here's the deal. Every night we're going to tell each other a different way that we experienced that, because I wanted them to know it wasn't just them. It was Aaron and I as well. And that it isn't a function of failure. It's a function of beginning.
Yeah.
You should not know how to do these things. You should not automatically have an awareness of how to do these things. This is what it means to be new.
Yeah.
And it was so helpful for our family to have some shared conversations and some new shared language. But as time went on, I realized I think the real gift in it was for me.
Yeah.
I was 41 or 42 when we moved. I'd been living in my hometown for a long time. I had written several books. I'd been a part of my home church for a long time. Without meaning to, I had sort of become like an expert person, right? Like you can come to me with a question. I will be here at the center of it all, answering all your questions, putting you all on the right track. And all of a sudden, I couldn't figure out how to take the subway. I couldn't figure out how to get my laundry done. I had to make new friends. I had to re-navigate friendships that used to be every day that were now long distance. And I really needed to take on the beginner's posture as opposed to continuing in that expert identity. It didn't work anymore. It was like shoes that didn't fit anymore. Yeah. And once I took that identity off, all of a sudden, a lot opened up in me, a new sense of curiosity and the idea that, sure, there's value in just knowing something, but there's something really valuable about being willing to learn something.
Yeah.
And it really shifted a lot in a lot of different parts of my life, in my approach to relationships, in my writing, in my marriage, in my faith. It really was one of those phrases and ideas that started to change everything.
Yeah, I love that. There's a scene where you're talking about you take up watercolor painting. And I wrote this quote down because I need to hear this. It said, "It's back to embracing that beginner thing. If you have to be great at everything you do, you can't learn anything new because the learning process is inherently about failing and trying again, figuring it out in messy and circuitous ways. It's hard and fumbling, and that's how any of us learn anything at all. Doing something badly is humbling, and sometimes it's frustrating. And for those of us who are used to being experts, it's categorically worth every second." And I wrote that down because this whole season that we're doing leading up to my book, it's called the Slow Growth Equals Strong Roots season, and it's finding grace, freedom, and purpose in an overachieving world. And as a recovering overachiever, I have sought out the things I did well and very quickly quit all the things I didn't. And just this idea of, as experts or as leaders or as people who have become established at anything, we feel like we can't struggle or have anything we don't immediately know all the answers to, or we couldn't stand on stage and give a talk about. And I just I let that really sink in for a minute, because I feel like in doing that, there's a part in the book where you talk about this. In doing that, you just decide, I am the person who wears this kind of sweater and lives in this kind of house and lives, in this kind of neighborhood. And you just, without even realizing it, commit yourself to being that one kind of person for the rest of your life. Why? When did that get determined? Is that 25 or 30 or 35? When do we get locked into these roles? And so I want you to talk a little bit about the last couple years. Obviously, pandemic, there's some other, health things you talk about in the book. What are just some things where life was you haven't chosen to step into some new places on your own, so I'm going to help you. I'm going to help you be a beginner at some things.
Well, one of the biggest things is, when you move into a new town, I lived in a town that it's the same town I'd lived in since I was born. I'd moved away and come back, but there was a serious amount of history there. Yeah. My cousins were there. My brother was there. All of our extended family were my college friends, everybody. And all of a sudden, I had to meet people for the first time, and they didn't know who my parents were. They didn't know I was a writer. They didn't know what town I was from. They didn't know who my kids were. I had to actually just learn how to build relationships in a really standing at the school ground kind of way. Yeah. At a park on a play date. I went to a party of a friend of mine who's an artist, and she invited me to an art showing of hers. And I don't know her very well, but I was very honored to be invited. The last minute, the friend I was going with couldn't go. And so I went totally by myself. And she was the guest of honor. And so I can't stand next to her the whole night. Yeah. And I had to just I am a grown-up lady who's going to walk up to a group of strangers and say, "Hey, isn't this piece of art beautiful?" And I felt like such a weirdo, but I realized hey, these are good muscles to have, and they're muscles I haven't had to use in a long time. and their health, these are muscles that you don't want to atrophy, right?
Mm.
You don't want to live a life where you never have to introduce yourself to a new person, where you never have to break into a conversation and feel a little bit awkward. Those are good muscles to keep in shape. The other thing, even just on a basic level, when I first got to New York, and I think I was going to put this story in the book and like, maybe I forgot, you get to that point in the book. At the end, you're like, oh, I forgot to tell that one or whatever.
There's another book. Yeah.
Right. When I got my hair done for the first time, the guy who did my hair is like from Utah and had moved here just before we did. And I was asking him for advice. And he said, I actually do have one piece of advice, and it's don't be afraid to ask for help. And I was like, okay, like say more about that. And he said, I so badly didn't want to look like a rookie and didn't want to look like a tourist that I wouldn't ask anybody anything. He's like, but that meant I didn't go on the subway for a long time. Yeah. I didn't hail a cab. I didn't buy those last minute Broadway tickets because I just didn't know how. And I was like, I think you are saying something really important to me. Yeah. And so I asked for help just constantly. Like, excuse me, I just moved here. I don't know how this works. Yeah. Hello, excuse me. It looks like you know where the subway is going and I don't. I went to the fitness center last night and she was like, so you know this? I was like, I don't know. I don't know anything about this. I don't know how to do the lock in the locker room. I don't know how to lift weights. I don't know where, being willing to, and people love to be asked for help, right?
Yeah.
Very rarely are people like, oh, you don't know where the locker room is? What's wrong with you? You know, they're like, this is something I know. This is something I've learned and I'd love to share it with you. And so that being willing to make a new friend or at least a new acquaintance or have a conversation with a stranger and then being willing to ask for help, those are things I want to keep with me the rest of my life. I think they're important skills to have that if you're pretty comfortable in certain situations, you just don't have to use those muscles, but I'm glad I have them right now.
Yeah. Something that I think was really interesting when you were talking that it just made me wonder, and I think you mentioned this like briefly in passing in the book, like, I don't know, just that idea of like, you said it's a good muscle to not let atrophy, to have to introduce yourself again. And I wonder about the flip side of that, of like almost starting to feel like you're in a fishbowl because there are so many people who know you and there are so many people who see you as this one thing and you have to be that one thing everywhere you go. There's this one beautiful, brutal, amazing line. It's like a fragment of a sentence where you're in a church and you're really reeling and no, this isn't our first time in church. No, we're not new to being Christians. Yes, you can take a picture. And it's like, oh, like that. I felt that to the center of my heart because it's like living a life behind the glass with like people watching your pain unfold in a million different ways. And so I guess like the question is, I don't even know what the question is except to say like, obviously, New York has been amazing for you in that respect where you can have like some anonymity there. But like, is there ever a moment, and I ask this is me asking as like a new author, like, is there ever a moment where you'd like to rewind the clock? Do you know what I mean? Like, ooh, like, I feel like I've asked like maybe Jen Hatmaker this question as well. Like, do you ever like wish there didn't get so many eyes on your life? Do you know what I mean?
It's such a good question. And it's, I could talk about this with you for like 10 hours. Yeah. And actually Jen and I talk about it all the time. Here's something I wish in that moment, in that church, I wish I would have said, so I have always been, I always want to be really, really kind and gracious and really understanding of the bravery it takes to come up to someone you don't know. Yeah. And I'm really honored that someone would read a book of mine and I want to steward that like that. I work really hard to be really kind to people that encounter me in a situation like that. That's important to me. Yeah. I wish that I would have said, hey, today is a really hard day for me. And I know that you see me as maybe a public person, but I'm also a person. Yeah. And if it would be okay with you, I'd love to not take my picture. Maybe you could send me an email and I'll send your daughter a signed book like maybe next week, but I'm like in a real life moment right now. And it would be great to be able to do this just as a person, not a public person. Yeah. And I think those of us who have found ourselves, well, I say found ourselves in public positions, but it doesn't happen by accident. It's something we co-create.
Yeah.
But those of us who have done that, we have a lot of responsibility. But I think it's a different responsibility than I used to think. I think it used to be largely like you have to be, you have to give people something. You have to allow them a piece of you. You have to be approachable. You have to make those moments really lovely for them. And I think I never want to do the opposite of that. Like I never want to be rude to somebody, of course. But I think we need to start and continue having nuanced, honest conversations about, I hope that I offer something useful in these books. I also am a very human person who's grappling with the complexity of what it means to have so many eyes on me. And it can be tricky sometimes. Yeah. And I'm going to disappoint you. You're going to disagree with me. I'm going to make mistakes. Sometimes I'm going to want more privacy than you think is appropriate. I'm just as human as you are on either sides of this screen. Yeah. And if you ever feel uncertain or unattractive or kind of like you want to hide, you can guarantee that I feel that too sometimes. Yeah. And so I think I have a lot of thoughts about what public life does to us in sometimes tricky ways. As long as I'm a part of any public life, I'm committed to being a real life person with boundaries, with flaws, with parts that I share and don't share, with good days and bad days, with things that I allow in and things that I don't. I don't ever want to perpetuate the myth that it's easy and lovely all the time.
Yeah, I love that. And as you were talking, I was thinking of like that recent example with Adele, where like she was supposed to be on tour and like the night before or whatever it is, she just had to like come on and say we couldn't do it. And like the response from people to her was, you're being a leader right now. You're showing us how to say, I have limits and I need more time. And nobody has given us a rule book for how to do this well in a pandemic. We're all expecting to still hit deadlines and show up and deliver. And we're pretending like things haven't changed, and they have changed. And so you have this beautiful quote. You say, this is not about just what I've been through. This is about what remains in all of our lives. When the deals and agreements and myths and illusions have been washed away by pain and loss and years, this is about a search for grounding when nothing feels stable, the yearning for peace in a raging storm. And so I want to talk about some of these rhythms for grounding that you have been able to identify. There's one where you talk about looking under the anger, I think is the one. And just to talk about a little bit of that, including the walking and what that does.
I think it's easy to think that when you've been through something really difficult, or when you're in a season that's still really difficult, that there are ideas that are going to change you, right? If I can figure this out in my mind, or if I can like shift my perspective. But I think, and I'm probably going to get this wrong, and my husband is definitely going to be disappointed that I got it wrong. I want to say, I hate that I don't know this. It's either Richard Rohr or Ronald Rolheiser. And one of them says, we don't think ourselves into new ways of living. We live ourselves into new ways of thinking. Yeah. Right. And so what I found and keep finding is it's not that much about changing your mind. It's about things you do every day that end up changing your mind and your heart along the way. Yeah. It's about a set of practices that ground you and stabilize you and heal you. For me, you mentioned this, a really big one is walking. I love to walk just in general. And it's also so healthy for our bodies. And also, I had a therapist who told me right in the middle of just my deepest heartbreak, he said, one thing you need to know is that grief is somatic, meaning it lives in your body. And so it's going to be in your body until you get it out of your body. And especially our first couple months here, I walked hundreds of miles all over this city. And it's like I could feel myself getting a little bit lighter and a little bit freer every mile.
Yeah.
So walking is a big thing for me, and also walking alone, but also walking with a friend.
Yeah.
I have a couple friends here that I walk with, but primarily one. And just that, like, well, she'll come flying out of her building and we'll head around the corner and we pick up right where we left off, and like, what happened in your day and what happened in your day. And the way that we sort of take care of each other and listen to each other and along the way is really significant.
Yeah.
That connection is really significant. And then really practical things like especially like right now in a season, we were talking about with the pandemic going on and the restrictions going on. And right now, I know it's different everywhere, but right now we're sort of in everything changes like every 7 days, right?
Yes.
And you feel some of that like change fatigue. I think we all need, frankly, a lot more sleep. I think we all need a lot more downtime. I think we're exhausted on like how have we been doing this for 2.5 years level? Do you know what I mean? Or 2 years level.
Yeah.
And so really basic things like looking for beauty wherever you can, taking a couple minutes to write down what you're grateful for, reaching out to a friend, spending more time texting than on social media, walking regularly. A lot of people would not call those spiritual practices, but I very much would. They're the things we do every day to tend to our spirits. That's a spiritual practice.
Yeah.
And I think to be really serious about, they say like what you do every day matters so much more than what you do once a year.
Yeah.
So what are the ways we organize and center our lives around a couple of these practices to bring about long-term spiritual health? That's really important to me.
Yeah. Yeah. I love when you were talking about the walking and the grief being somatic and walking it out. And you said that I think it was walking is the speed of the soul. And it's so beautiful. And you were talking about like the times that you've had to fly somewhere. It's almost like your soul couldn't catch up with how fast your body had just moved through time and space. And I was like, yes, 100%. And I also like heard once that our souls are village sized, that they're only equipped to handle the problems and the griefs and the heartbreak of the size of a village, but we're daily exposed to global heartbreak. And I feel all of that. And I don't know, I guess like just talking a little bit or thinking through like, what do we do? What do we do like in this world that seems to be moving faster and it seems to be, like you said, removing itself from human connection? It's social media versus like a one-on-one conversation. And it does seem like we're hopping on planes more and we're moving faster and there are hyperloop things coming here and there and automation and like, or self-driving, what is the word I'm looking for? Autonomous. That's it. Autonomous cars. Like all the things. Like I feel like the trajectory of the world is speeding up and disconnecting. And like it's a radical act of rebellion to go on a walk with a friend, And like what is it? What do we do? Basically, like do we have to become just completely countercultural? Like I literally ask myself this daily, should I just delete Instagram? I don't know. Like that's kind of where I am in life. So tell me all of your wisdom there.
Well, I absolutely just wrote that down, that our souls are village size. That really connects with me. Yeah. I love that. And I think, they say that technology is inherently neutral, right? But it's humans who use it and we use it for our own purposes. And so we have to practice wisdom and restraint in how technology, and we do that with our kids quite, none of us are like, yeah, all the technology seems great, do it. We're like, okay, what's age appropriate? How many hours a day? When do you need to put down your screen and instead read a book or go out and play with a friend? Right. We intuitively give our kids those boundaries, but we don't very often give them to ourselves. But I think we should. Yeah. I think we should practice the same critical eye that we use for our kids' interaction with technology that we do for ourselves. Yeah. And I do think we have to be very careful and possibly countercultural. so, you know, what people sometimes think like, oh my gosh, you moved to New York, your life just got crazy. My life just got very small and very local because New York, especially the way we live in it, I live in a neighborhood.
Yeah.
I don't live in all of the 5 boroughs all the time with all of the, you know, like going through all the big tunnels and on the subway. I have a core group of very close friends that I spend a lot of time with.
Yeah.
And our kids are very close, and we take care of each other. I don't take care of everybody I ever met on the internet. I don't take care of every person I've ever met that I had to fly to a plane, but I take care of this very small group of people, and they take care of me. And I think that's a more sustainable way to think about living.
Yeah.
Who are the people to whom you are deeply committed for this season? We can never predict the future. And how do we care for each other well within that? Yeah. I think a lot of times we think our capacity is a lot greater than it is. And if we focus a little bit smaller, we get to focus a little more deeply. Yeah. I think that's really beautiful.
Yes. Yes, that is really beautiful. I think about I'm 100% an introvert, and I think about that concept of like I go deep with people. I just can't do like the surface or the wide. Like extroverts, I think are, I mean, not even like just extroverts across the board, but like your social butterfly extroverts, it's like a lot of wide, like a broad, like a lot of breadth. And I like that, those deep roots. I want to talk a lot about, because I'm feeling all of this, the 40s. I will be 42 in May. And you got this note from your mom that says, when she was in her mid 40s, she wrote a line in her journal and she sent it to you and said, "This made me think of you. Every single thing that used to work has just stopped working all at the same time." And I wrote down, yes, 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 yes. Like it's not even like, for me, it's not even like, they stopped working necessarily in all of the ways being bad ways. It's just that all the things I used to do no longer work. It is the subtitle of the book, Discovering New Ways of Living When the Old Ways Stop Working. And, I feel like for me, some of them probably did need to go. And I'm wondering, I want to read a line to you, and I want to ask you like a specific question about a phrasing. You say, "To my great horror, the first part of my 40s have been an unwinding of the threads that wrapped around my life, a throwing off of all the lines, a systematic and painful series of unbelongings. I didn't choose the unbelongings. By that I mean it wasn't strength or independence or boldness. It was more someone peeling my fingers one by one away from the life I'd been clutching with white knuckles, the life that didn't fit anymore, no matter how hard I was trying to hold on." And the line that I picked up on is the throwing off of all the lines. And we do a little bit of sailing in that we go on boats when other people sail them. We don't know how to sail them ourselves. But we really love being on sailboats. And I know that you come from a family of sailors. And to throw off the lines is to throw off the tethers, to throw off the chains, to be set free, to chase the wind. And so I'm wondering if you in hindsight or as it was happening, found that unwinding, the peeling back of the fingers, a little bit like freedom. Or did it feel like that way at the time? Does it now?
It's such a good question. So for as much as I love sailing, and I really, really do. Yeah. In this metaphor, if you ever walk by a sailboat on the dock that has like 100 lines, and you know, like this boat has not left the marina for a decade. Yeah. This is a liveaboard in the most extreme way. This is a home that looks like a boat, right? Yeah. That's who I've been. That's what I wanted. Yeah. In my actual human life, I like going sailing, but in my like inside self, I was the liveaboard with 1 million more lines than anybody needs. And I wanted that. I really wanted a sense of stability and security and safety, familiarity, family, roots. That sounded perfect to me. Yeah. And so, and I, write about this in the book, but that's not what my husband wanted for our family. Yeah. That's not, our relationship to our church was changing, to our friends, to our families, to our hometowns, all of this. But I will say, I did not enjoy it in the process, and it did not feel like freedom. It felt like loss. And, it took me a long time. I remember where I was standing when I had the extremely risky, rebellious new thought that there might be not just okay days to come, but even better days. Because I thought everything else from that moment out would be like just a consolation prize, like a second place, like a shadow of my former wonderful life.
Yeah.
And then I remember, and it was actually, now I'm thinking of all these things I should have put in the book and I didn't. Our pastor preached a sermon about Jesus turning the water into wine. And the way he interpreted it was something like there was adequate wine, but then when it ran out, Jesus turned the water into like really, really great wine.
Yeah.
There might be great wine still coming in your life, and you're sitting there with your adequate wine. You can't even imagine what miracle might happen in your future. And so I never want people to think like, I just sort of sailed through this pretty well, like doing it great. I'm like a poster child for how to go through major change. No, I did it so badly. And that's part of why I had to write about it, was to say like, I'm probably not the only one who's not handling this super well.
Right. Yeah. 100%.
I didn't. I handled it so bad.
Yeah.
And I learned a lot from it. And now in hindsight, I can see how valuable it was. But when I write, I always think about I'm not an expert. I'm not a leader. I'm not a pastor. I'm a friend walking alongside. And if there are other people who are like, I am going through some things and I'm doing it kind of badly. I'm like, oh, me too.
Yeah.
That's how we do things a lot of times.
Yeah.
We do hard things really, really badly.
Yeah. Yeah. That brings up two things to me. One is the scene where you're sitting on a rooftop, some 40-year-olds and some 20-year-olds, and the 20-year-olds are talking about all their plans, and the 40-year-olds are trying to decide whether you should tell them. Go ahead and make those plans. It's gonna be interesting. I love that scene, and then at the same time, I'm also like, oh. I read this really interesting article the other day. This is totally off script, but it is very relevant, and it was talking about the difference between millennials, which depending on the definition, I technically could fall into, but I'm much more like the Xennial, where it's like we have some Gen X and some millennial. But it was saying the difference between millennials and the new Gen Z, the new generation, is that millennials know things are bad, but all of the like rom-com movies they've watched have told them they're still going to get their happy ending, whereas Gen Z knows it's bad and they're like, it's just not getting better. And like, as I'm like thinking of that rooftop scene, there's still that part of me, maybe this is a little bit of like the millennial in me, the little bit that I have, that was like, but I still want to know it's going to get better. I want to know that that it isn't just the consolation prize for the rest of my life. And just kind of like thinking through like, what does it look like to go, this is going to be hard and it's going to be hard for a while. And that may be it. We're like, do we hope for good things?
Oh, I mean, I think we totally hope for good things. Yeah. And I'm not saying there won't be good. I think I'm saying what ends up being good might not be the good you thought you wanted.
Yeah. Yes.
And there might be a lot of pain along the way. And there might be really beautiful, wonderful moments all mixed up with the pain as well.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yes.
In some of our hardest moments, there were also really beautiful moments. And there are things now that I'm experiencing that I love so deeply that I didn't think I wanted, and I specifically actively tried to avoid. That's what I'm saying. It's not, there are no happy endings. It's most of us have no idea what our happy ending is going to be and what we're going to have to go through to get it.
Yes. Okay. So that brings me really naturally into the part where you're talking about the interconnectedness of life. And you say, because that's how life is, interconnected and multifaceted, we carry around our whole selves, our past and our parents, our loves and our limitations, our dreams and grocery lists and our wounds. That's how it always is. And I don't know if you are into the Enneagram at all, but I am an Enneagram 4.
I am.
What is your Enneagram?
Okay, yes. I'm a 7 with a 6 wing.
Oh, interesting.
Yes.
Interesting. So
and I am married to a 4.
Oh, yeah. I'm so sorry. We're a moody little bunch.
It's a lot. Yeah. I won't lie.
We feel a lot of things all the time.
So many feelings.
All the time. Yeah. So many feelings. And so like, I really, that resonates with me, this idea of like, I feel like the little Mary and the wounds that come with me, and the new Mary and whatever, the now Mary, and all the wounds are just hanging out all the time. And like that fatal flaw that Enneagram 4s have. And then you're kind of also talking about we're stepping into our next self. You say she was waiting in the wings, and all of a sudden I needed her desperately. She is my next self, the one I've been waiting to be all along without even knowing it. Thank God for her. And I have to tell you, I very much, I like exhaled and breathed at that description. And here's why, because and I actually write about this in Slow Growth. I feel like this version of me, this next self of me, is a version of me I've been chasing my whole life because she's better than me. And she's like got her to-do list together, and her hair is never out of place, and she eats her vegetables or whatever. And I call her in the book the illusionist in the distance, that she's up on some gilded, illuminated mountaintop with her hair floating but never landing. And I am clawing and scratching to catch up with her, nails broken and bleeding, scars in my once open palms. And she looks at me for a minute, these eyes that are a reflection, and then goes on without me. And it talks about like the heartbreak. We've all been left by somebody, but then to see us be left by ourselves, this future version of ourselves that couldn't wait on us to catch up. So a very kind of like tormented relationship with my next self. And so this brings me so many questions about like, do we get one? Do we get many next selves? Are we like, sort of, I'm thinking of like the Matrix or something where they like, like these different selves split out or whatever. So just tell me your thoughts on the next self that are much more self-compassionate than mine, because mine is just, she's better.
Right. She's better, and she leaves you.
She leaves me.
She's the worst.
The worst.
Yes. So what I like when you're telling that story, I felt that so viscerally. Your next self will never abandon you. Never. Like you're all together, all in the same place. You're all traveling together. And I am not talking at all about an improved self, because I have been down that road a million times.
Yeah.
I am not talking about better hair. I'm not talking about more together. I'm talking about like what I picture is a woman, let's say all done up, all like completely, everything's perfect. And she's carrying like 100 heavy bags.
Yeah.
And she's walking to become, and this is the other thing, your next self is not out there. She's here.
Yeah.
You're embodying her. So this woman's walking, and she's taking off every heavy bag. And then she's like taking out the hair extensions.
Yes.
She's like pulling off the fake eyelashes. Yes. She's breaking off the fake nails. She's taking off this like flashy, showy dress. And what's underneath is like a perfect, simple, she takes off her heels. She takes out like, she becomes a more elemental, pure, wiser, weirder, braver, but more distinctly her own self.
Wow.
I think it's way more about taking things off and leaving things behind than it is about chasing or achieving that self. You don't have to earn your right to be her. You have to leave behind a whole lot of garbage to discover she's been there all along.
Woo. Dang. Woo. Shauna Niequist, what are you doing to me? Woo. While I recover from that, talk about the heart on your arm and what that relates to what you just said about you don't have to achieve into this version.
So when I was writing Present Over Perfect, it was right at a time in my life where, and I think a lot of us are susceptible to this. I think women especially, I think Christians especially, I think writers, anybody who does any kind of public work, there's this, you are what you do, you are what you create, you are what we can measure. And I was realizing that the energy that was required to kind of fuel my life, especially my professional life, I was having to draw really deep. I was having to spend it all.
Yeah.
And I realized very clearly, like, I remember a writer friend saying to me, there's no there. You're never going to work hard enough publishing as an entity is never going to call you and be like, great job, take a rest.
Right.
They're going to be like, great job, do 10 times more. That's the nature of it.
Yeah.
And so I just had to like get really clear on a very deep level. Who do I want to be? What am I sacrificing? What am I not willing to sacrifice? What am I willing to let go in order to return to that person I want to be? And so I'm a lefty. And so my left hand is my writing hand. And I decided anything I make for the rest of my life, I could be very, very productive or like not at all. I could make a ton of stuff or almost nothing. The fuel by which I make things is love. That's it.
Yeah.
Not competition, not pressure, not hustle, not proving or competing. I make it out of love or I don't make it at all. And that actually helped me make some really core decisions.
Yeah.
I remember saying to someone in publishing, this is going to sound nuts to you. If I'm going to do this project out of love, which is the only way I work, it's going to take me this long. If you want me to do it out of hustle or grind or fear, I can get it done in 6 weeks, but I don't use those fuels anymore.
Yes.
So if you want me, my fuel is love and it takes a really long time.
Yes.
And it was it changed everything for me.
Yes. Oh my gosh. You have no idea how much you are speaking my language right now. This reminds me of something else you talk about in the book where your therapist researcher friends talks about self-compassion fuels way more change than shame and beating yourself up ever could. And it reminds me, in my first book, Dirt, I have this whole thing about being the girl in the red cape and you're running through the deep, dark woods trying to get to safety away from your story. And there's this wolf, big bad wolf chasing you, ripping at your heels. You run because you know if you stop, it might kill you. But then at last, breathless and exhausted, you look over your shoulder and you see, I am the girl in the red cape, but I am also the wolf. And the voice in my head telling me to run and not stop running is my own. And in this book, I revisit that scene, but from the perspective of the wolf. And there's this line that's like, at a certain point, the big bad wolf is now afraid of us because we've caged it. We've locked it in our three-ring circus, made it dance. And when it wouldn't run the way we wanted it to, we twisted the thorn in its paws. And that's what I have done for a very long time, is exactly what you're describing. If I need, and you talk about this in this book, if I needed to like find that adrenaline, if I needed to feel the fear because the pressure was on and the deadline was nearing, I could always find it. And then at a certain point, it's like the adrenaline, I don't know, like, it's like adrenaline fatigue. It's like a real thing. The tank goes empty. And now we have to figure out how to do stuff without being chased, that it's not like our whole identities will get gobbled up if we don't perform and achieve and produce.
Think about how our world would change if we all said, I know exactly who I am and who I'm not. And you can't tempt me by telling me I'm going to become something else if I do this work on this schedule.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
My worth and my identity are settled. So I'll do this work or not if it's useful or helpful and if it works in the greater scheme of what's meaningful to me. But I won't run on fear and hustle anymore. Our whole world would change if that was the case.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about, I want to talk just a little bit about, I want to get this in case somebody really needs to hear it. This idea, you talk about a moment you hit where you could either show up with a brave face or you could tell your friends what was really going on. And you showed up super messy and you said it felt kind of weird and embarrassing, but it changed things. That's what we have to do right now. Like we cannot keep faking it all the time. And so to somebody who's like, you know what, things have stopped working, all of them, all at once. And I don't know what to do. And things are really messy. And I know I need to talk to some friends about this. But I don't know how to stop being the expert. I don't know how to stop being the leader. I don't know how to be vulnerable or have problems. What are the first steps? How do we even begin to approach that?
Well, I will say most of the good or healthy things I've done in my life, I did kind of on accident. So in that situation, I didn't decide I'm going to be, this is a moment where I'm going to lead with vulnerability. I was just like a disaster and it fell out,
Yeah.
But the first thing that came to mind when you were asking me that question is I think we have a mutual friend, Laura Tremaine.
Yeah. Yes.
And Laura's amazing book,
Yeah.
Share Your Stuff, I'll Go First.
Yes.
That's what I would say. I
Yeah.
would say, like, there is not a person who is alive and paying attention right now who thinks things are like going great for all of us,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
There are different levels of hard depending on where you live and how you live, whatever, but this is hard. This is a hard season in our collective global experience. It's hard.
Yeah.
One of the ways you can serve the people in your life most is by saying, I'm going to share my stuff and I'll go first.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm hitting a wall of exhaustion. I don't know if anybody else is. I guarantee everyone else is.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm feeling anxiety in a way I haven't in several years. Maybe I'm the only one. Of course, you're not the only one. I think, especially right now, when we've been sort of required to practice like extreme resilience, right? Get up, get back up, get back up. Adapt again, adapt a different way, adapt back. The mental health and like emotional wellness things that are getting scraped away in us are very real and very serious.
Yeah.
And so if you want to do good work in your community right now, go first and invite a deep conversation about what's really happening in your life and family and marriage and house, and make space for other people's conversations.
Yeah.
A lot of us are waiting for someone else to say it first.
Yes.
And then when someone does it, the floodgates open, right?
Yeah.
If you have it in you to be the brave person who goes first, that's a huge gift that you can give the people that you walk closely with.
Yeah.
I feel really, really strongly about that.
Yeah. Something that I was thinking of as you were talking and also earlier, one of my favorite parts in Present Over Perfect is the scene where you're talking about you're going 100 miles an hour and you pull into like a 7-Eleven and you go like put your mouth under the Slurpee machine, the red stuff, all over your face, and then you're flying down the highway again and you say, all I want is one real strawberry. And I'm curious, so like that version of Shauna, and then 2 years of being completely stopped with the pandemic. Is it still one strawberry? Like what's valuable to you now?
That's a great question. Well, the first thing that came to mind, I think that, the restrictions of the pandemic were difficult and are difficult for all of us in different ways, depending on our personalities and depending on, frankly, how many people live in our house, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like one of my best friends lives alone. So the way he's experiencing this is totally different. He gets really overly isolated.
Yeah.
He's alone with himself and his work. And I do not get overly isolated with 2 sons and a husband, Yeah. So we're all experiencing it really differently. But as a 7, as an extrovert, as a person who loves like connection and play, one of the things that saved me in this pandemic, I am not kidding you, when I look back at like what got me through, there was a little group of us who were quarantining together, testing, vaxxed, all the things. We were very, very cautious about all that.
Yeah.
And on Friday nights, we would get together and we would dance, like not like a sophisticated dance party. We would dance along to our kids' video game, Just Dance game. And it brought me just an unreasonable amount of joy.
Yeah.
And of course it made the kids mortified. They hated it. Like there's nothing worse than seeing your parents dance, right? Especially like all together in the living room. And it just being silly and enjoying music and using our bodies and laughing and being together and not caring what we look like, but also not being just like so stuck and lonely. For me, that's what got me through. And we still do it. We totally still do it.
That's
Every
amazing.
once in a while, I'm like, guys, I'm going to invite myself over, get on the Just Dance app.
Yeah.
It's, so
I've never, I don't know if I've ever heard of the Just Dance app, but now I'm super checking it out.
So it's great. So it shows you, like you watch it on the screen and you're one of 3 characters and you just have to do what they do. That's it.
Okay. All right.
It's so fun.
All right.
It's a delight. And here's what the dances are just made up for that app. So like the fact that I know all of Janet Jackson's Rhythm Nation actual choreography, which I do. is not an
I
advantage.
just fell in love with you even more. Wow. That's a complicated
Like
move there in the beginning because that
it
can go
is.
wrong
Oh yeah.
really
Uh-huh. Definitely.
with
Um,
the
but it's
hand count.
different. So
Yeah.
you just, yeah. But then we have to confess to ourselves. So like one of the moms was like really good, like better than the rest of us. And one of her kids was like, Mom practices all day long. We were like, what? You've been
What?
practicing. So yeah, it's very fun.
Not okay. Not
That's
okay.
the kind of thing that just brings me right back to life right now.
Yeah. So that's actually a good place for us to kind of tie this up here. And that's this idea. Like, I love, I was thinking about this too. Like, I love, that's what I mean when we were first talking at the very beginning, that it's not just the salve on the wound. It's let's clean out the wound first. Like, I
Mm,
love that I can feel you as you're going through the seasons, spring into summer into fall, and processing through the different stages of this. I feel you come back to life throughout the
mhm,
book, and I just love that so much. And I want to talk about this idea of enchanted. You say you are allowed to love tiny, daily, ordinary moments in your life. You're allowed to feel wild joy for the simplest and smallest of reasons. You're allowed to be unreasonably delighted by spicy pickles, a perfect apple, or a joke that your teen tells you. You're allowed to be bewitched by your partner even after all these years, to yearn to be close to him, to bury your face in his neck. You're allowed to feel joy for almost no reason except that you walked by that candle that your mother sent you, and even when it's not lit, just seeing it there on the hutch makes you happy. You're allowed to hold memories in your mind and play them over and over like an old-fashioned slideshow. Click, click, click. And that reminded me of that like scene in Mad Men when Don Draper has lost his family and he's lost everything that matters, and he's doing this ad pitch for Kodak or whatever for their carousel. And he said, it's not a projector, it's a carousel. It's this like return to nostalgia. It's this return to life. And I love that. I love this idea, this like return to life. And you talk about like the flags, the nautical flags, and it's both. They can mean
mm.
yes and change course. Yes and change course. So what words do you have for the woman who's maybe in that place? She needs to come alive again, and she wants to say yes, and she knows yes even if it's a new course.
Um, I would say you're not alone. Um, get a journal and write about three things: pain, desire, and gratitude.
Hmm.
And I write about this in the book. In the morning, I would look at pain and desire. What hurts and what do I want?
Yeah.
And in the evening, I would look at what's here and beautiful. What have I been given, even in the middle of this dark season?
Yeah.
Start getting comfortable. Start finding a language for your own pain, desire, and gratitude.
Hmm.
And then, I talk about in the book the idea of putting yourself in the path of joy, putting yourself in the path of beauty. These things don't come to us when we're laying flat on our back. You have to get up and get out into the world and look for it.
Yeah.
So take a walk, call a friend, try something new. We participate in our own healing, and it's hard, and it's worth it.
Yeah. My gosh. Well, I was just sitting here thinking as you were talking, like, I don't want this to end, and I could talk to you for hours and hours and hours. But I know you have a lot of these to do. And so I'm so thankful for you. And I didn't know that it was possible, but I love you even more at the other side of this hour. So
Oh,
thank you for that. And let everybody know where they
mm.
can get the book. Are there any, pre-order bonuses they need to know about? Like all the things.
Oh, thank you. Well, and thank you for saying that. You've done a beautiful job with this conversation. It's
Thank
been
you.
really great to talk with you. And I'm reading Dirt right now, and I love it. It's
Oh
really
my
good.
God.
Yeah.
What are you? I'm so
I
glad you saved
haven't
that until the end because I wouldn't have made it through this.
I haven't finished it yet, but I really enjoy it. You're a beautiful writer. It's
Thank
very,
you.
very good. So
Thank you.
thank you for writing that book. You can get the book at independent bookstores and big stores, and pre-orders anywhere are very, very good.
Yeah.
And there is an exclusive at Barnes and Noble where you get an extra chapter about writing and creativity and a book list of the books that kind of got me through this season.
Yeah.
So that's one special one, but there'll be more of those to come, different editions and different like special stuff. But
Yeah.
anywhere, you can get it anywhere, and especially local bookstores really need help right now. So
Yeah.
especially to head to your local bookseller.
Yeah. I love that. Well, I'm going to leave you guys with these words from Shauna. She says, life will break your heart in 1,000 ways, but there's still music and there's still dancing. There's still coffee and toast. There's still kissing and there's still late dinners on busy sidewalks. Twinkly lights, novels, old movies, soft blankets, black and white photos, French braids, salty hot French fries dipped in mayo and ketchup. We're still falling in love. We're still learning to forgive. We're still watching our kids learn and grow and stretch into their next selves. We're still watching the sun as it rises and as it sets, still watching the moon wax and wane. We're still trying, still hoping, still getting it wrong, and still getting it right. The book is I Guess I Haven't Learned That Yet, Discovering New Ways of Living When the Old Ways Stop Working. It is out everywhere books are sold today. Get that in your hands. Get as many copies as you can. Give them to all your friends who need this right now. And while you're there, make sure you order a copy of Slow Growth Equals Strong Roots. I think they'd make an amazing bundle. Check them out both together. And until next time, friends, this is The Mary Marantz Show.